Hey team, and welcome to this month's Tales from the CTO. My name is Jamie from ProServeIT, and today we'll be chatting about 3 myths relative to ransomware. I get some of these somewhat a lot, if you will, and I think they're more recurring themes, and some of it's tied to small businesses, some small businesses that we work with, and the thought at times is, what size does a company become a target? And I think there's a thinking that there's some that think that your company is too small to be targeted, therefore the risk is reduced. The reality is that most cybercrime that happens nowadays is actually untargeted. They take a very much of a broad approach. It's a mass attack, if you will, that targets nobody and everyone at the same time, and it's just a big numbers game. So the idea is that if they target 1 million businesses, for example, statistically, even if only 1% of them become compromised, that's a very, very good investment for them. And that 1% could be small businesses, enterprises, and anything in between. So there is no size of an organization at which you could be targeted. I think everyone is just as likely to be targeted, quote unquote, from these types of attacks. The second one, and I think I see this a lot when we again, in either smaller businesses, in not-for-profits, in government agencies that still rely on, let's say, call it traditional protection, antivirus and firewalls. And it's been our thinking and what we've seen from an evidence perspective in terms of customers that we work with, that that's just not enough anymore. That would have been enough 7 years ago, 8 years ago, probably, when attacks, I think, were not in the way that they are now, when the cloud wasn't as prevalent. Nowadays, you need to go beyond this. You need to be leveraging things like multi-factor authentication to protect your identity. You need to be leveraging an antivirus that is not kind of a vanilla legacy antivirus, if you will, something that does not require a signature, so a file that you download to be and requires that to be updated in order to detect ransomware. It needs to be something that's dynamic, and there are many tools that do this. Defender for Endpoint from Microsoft, Sentinel-1, Carbon Black. There's quite a few that sit in that area. And finally, I think that when unless your organization has a dedicated security team, if you just have 1 or 2 IT individuals, or maybe as many as 4, you're unlikely to have a true cybersecurity expert. And what we're finding is that these people are critical, both in the detect stage, the protect stage, and the respond stage. So in order to protect your business, setting up the tools in the proper way, setting up processes and methodology to signal alerts, that's into the detect phase. So doing all of that to protect and detect from people that are trying to infiltrate your business is critically important. And then in the event when there is actually an attack and you need to respond, it is critically important that you tie into professionals for that assistance, not just for the speed of response, but also things like, if you have to negotiate with the ransomware providers, for example, there are kind of some best practices to follow there in order to make sure that you actually get your key in the end, that you're paying a reasonable price, and that process is also covered by your insurance, which hopefully you have, that covers cyber attacks. So these are just some of the 3 of the common, let's call it, myths that we hear about ransomware. The reality is no company is too small. You cannot just rely on a firewall and antivirus, and you absolutely need to help. You need the assistance of professionals to make sure that your business is protected. If you have any questions, we'd love to have a conversation. You can reach out at cto@proserveit.com. And until next time, this is this month's edition of Tales from the CTO.